When you look in the mirror, who do you see in the mirror?
First Arab American elected as mayor of Dearborn, Michigan. Abdullah Hammoud.
Abdullah Hammoud.
Abdullah Hammoud.
Abdullah Hammoud makes history.
We are people that are not rich in gold or currency. We're not rich in land, but we're rich in morals and values.
You live in a non-Muslim country. How do you navigate making decisions?
Always trying to put in the back of your mind, great, I'm trying to advance the quality of life for the people that I represent. I can't tell you that I'm always spot on in the decision making.
What are the biggest problems you're facing in the city?
Almost every major incident within my first year was related to mental health. Every day when I come into office, I receive a police report, almost on a daily basis, whether it's overdose, suicide.
On a daily basis?
We had an incident where you had an infant who came across a heroin needle on the floor from the parent that was using, that overdosed. It's one of the worst parts of the job. I'm the person who ran for office. Not my wife, not my daughter, not my parents, not my siblings, not my uncle. It's hurtful.
What's one comment that you read that stuck you in the heart?
Ooh, man, they told me, there's certain comments like that just take a great degree of shittiness for you to write.
Before we start today's episode, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day and giving this podcast a listen. And I also wanted to remind you that the only way this podcast will ever grow is with your support and with your help. So subscribe to the podcast, like this video, and now let's get the show started.
Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى
طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب
مدينة القدس العربية.
Abdullah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Welcome to Not From Here. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
First, I want you to introduce yourself, but I don't want you to introduce yourself the way everyone knows you. I want you to look, when you look in the mirror, who do you see in the mirror? Like, introduce me as if Abdullah is talking to his own self.
Yeah, Abdullah Hammoud, Ibn Hajj Ghadan al-Hajj Hussein, Abu Maryam, husband of Fatima, Ibn Khayyul al-Sheikh Ahmad Hammoud. Typically, most people know Hajj Hassan. That's honestly second oldest of five, brother to baby Al, al-Marhum al-Hajj Ali. That's Abdullah Hammoud.
Nice. How did you end up here? So the podcast is called Not From Here. And what's the story of how you ended up in America or how your parents ended up in America?
Yeah, my mother's family immigrated to America when they were 4. So it would have been 1974 for her, when she was 4, Afwan. And they fled what was happening in Lebanon. They came over here to try to find a better life. Jadd al-Marhum was looking for a job at the autos. He found one at the Furan making $25 to $50 a week until he ultimately found a job at the autos. My father's story, slightly different. Lebanese, but born and raised in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And so him, Sheikh Ahmed Hammoud, Amil Hajj Hassan, my grandfather was a concrete worker out in Saudi. And he came here in the early 80s. So he came here in his 20s, him and his brothers. And when they came here, he ultimately came across my mother, and the rest is set to be history.
Yeah. How's your relationship like with Lebanon? Have you been?
I've been twice.
Okay.
2007 to go see Jeddah. Spent most of the time in Adahiya, Har Tahriq. Obviously very struggling time after the war in 06. And so largely devastated. But I loved it. It was a very simple life. But I'll never forget walking into the powers out, Jiddim Maddad At-Takht. You walk in, they say Taha Wilo da Jiddak. He's tired. So you walk in, you're 17. You're like, Lashu Jit. Second time I went was in 2020 after the infijara that happened at the Beirut ports, to go help one with Amity. And so also a very difficult time for Lebanon. But I spent a lot of my time in Kaunan, the village of my father, and got to know a lot of my great aunts and uncles. And what I tell you about my relationship is I have a strong connection to it, even though I haven't spent much time there. And I think it's because of the household that I grew up in.
Your parents emphasized culture, Lebanon, we're from there.
Absolutely. They emphasize the culture, they emphasize the deen. And, usually when you explore your deen, you also have an attachment to your heritage and your lineage. And obviously it goes back to Lebanon. And just engaging with my great aunts and uncles, you just have a greater respect for Arad Lebanon. And meeting with Hajj Abu Mandar in Lebanon, in Kaunan, I was staying at his house. He came to me and trying to tell me about the people of Kaunan. And he said, we are people that are not rich in gold or currency. We're not rich in land, but we're rich in morals and values. That is who we are in this village. So there's just things that you hold on to and you clench to. I also, growing up, I really loved Arabic poetry. And so Zajal, more importantly, Talib Hamdan and the old school OGs. There was gold, and so that's why I largely listen to on my YouTube.
You would be able to understand those?
Nah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I listen to right now, largely my YouTube. Either that or some mawal of some sort.
That's nice.
Yeah.
How was your childhood like here, growing up in Dearborn? The difficulties and being raised with that difference, you're Lebanese, being born, raised here, and the positives.
You know what was interesting? I'll never forget. When I was in like 4th grade, I was with my friend in their car, and they asked me where I was from. I was like, oh, I'm from Kaunan. They're like, oh, Kaunan, Lebanon. I was like, no, Kaunan, Saudi. Because my father was born and raised in Saudi, so I never knew. I was like, oh, no, I'm Saudi. And so, slight confusion growing up.
Yeah.
But I loved my childhood. I'm the second oldest of 5. We were 4 brothers, and then my sister at the end. But we had a very rich childhood, not rich in, monetary perspective, but rich in memories, rich in relationships, rich in community. And I think that's what I appreciated most about the city of Dearborn was no matter where you were, it felt like a home. We all had our front doors unlocked, our back doors unlocked. It was a chaotic, beautiful mess across the whole board. And you'll never forget it. A lot of the friends that we all grew up with, we started together in the beginning. I went to Dar al-Arqam, Muslim Arabic private school growing up until the 3rd grade, and then kind of entered the public school system after that. But gave me a strong, attachment to my faith and to my culture and to my language.
Wow. What about the struggles? Did you get any racism? Did you get any, maybe people look at you differently? Not necessarily not necessarily the people that look like you. Maybe people that don't really look like you.
I mean, we grew up in the post 9/11 era, so I imagine for any Muslim or Muslim or Arab growing up in the post 9/11 era, racism was experienced. I remember I was at Woodworth Middle School when that happened. My mother, 9/11.
Yeah.
My mother picked us up when they canceled school. My mother, observes the hijab, and we got picked up. Somebody cut her off in the car and said, gave her the finger and said, go back to your country, and so on. The next day, walking home from school with a group of friends, and we were 11. Somebody pointed the gun out the 2nd floor of their house. Said, keep walking before I decide to shoot you Muslim kids.
You're a kid.
We were 11. So, you had those experiences. And, when I was 15, 16, going out with all my cousins to like Livonia for their community fair. I'll never forget, we're like 16. We got surrounded by about 15 to 20 middle-aged white men who were flinging their cigarettes at us and were shouting things like, we don't want your Middle Eastern oil, we want British petroleum. Fast forward more when I went to Ann Arbor for graduate school. And Ann Arbor is the quote unquote, the place, the progressive Mecca, where this doesn't exist. Sitting in class for one of my first exams. I just moved out to Ann Arbor for school. So I left Dearborn and it was snow time. And so I took out my hat and I was wearing a thick snow cap. On the inside, it uniquely had a Bible quote on the tag. The first time I noticed it. And so I'm sitting down reading this and I told my friends, man, this is kind of strange, but kind of cool. And this person grabs the hat and says, oh, did you know your prophet slaughtered millions of people to start his own religion? And
out of nowhere?
Out of nowhere. And the girl sitting next to him said, yeah, I learned that too growing up. And so, there's many a time where you kind of hit this, wall of racism. In the state house, when I served in the state house, now as mayor. And so there's at every point in time, at every junction, you've hit some form of racism, but it's just become...
How does that affect you though? Or does it at all?
Yeah, I imagine subconsciously to some extent it does affect you growing up. You kind of become more defensive. You have to understand that you have to be well read and well versed in order to counter some of the ignorance. But I think I'm at a point now where, I follow as best as I can to Imam Ali alayhi salam's quote of, I've never lost an argument with an intelligent individual, but I've never won one with an ignorant one.
Right.
Ignorance is is very radical.
But you wouldn't have that mentality when someone points a gun at you at 11. What do you go tell your mom at 11? Someone just pointed a gun at you.
That's what you say. And you get the learning lessons of never leave the house alone. When we used to travel when we were 16, 17, it was, make sure you always, as a group of people, always stick together. Make sure you know the number for the house. Do you know how to get from point A to point B? All these sorts of things. You get the lectures every single time before you leave. That's how you equip yourselves. That's how you defend yourselves.
What made you turn into politics?
The original dream, there's a movie called Patch Adams for Robin Williams, if you've ever watched it.
No.
It's a 90s movie, I think. And it's about this physician that, this individual that loves children, ends up going into medicine and starts this free institute to help treat people who don't have health care. And I fell in love with this idea of just wanting to help and wanted to give back. And in particular, I wanted to become a pediatric oncologist to treat children who were suffering from cancer. And
Is that what you went to grad school for?
I went to graduate school for my Master of Public Health in epidemiology, which is like the study of prevention of disease and preventative medicine. And that was the dream. Unsuccessful in that dream. I applied for 3 years straight to go to medical school in the States. I got denied. Probably by like 200 schools.
Wow.
Spent a lot of money on applications. But alhamdulillah, that's all you could say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't have it written for me. And so what I decided to do after I attained my master's was work in healthcare administration. And so I started working for the University of Michigan healthcare system and had a phenomenal mentor there. And so as I was kind of climbing the ladder, jumping from, health, from hospital to hospital, I was interviewing for what I thought would be extremely successful career. I finally landed that 6-figure job opportunity. I was 25, interviewing for the role. And Khayy, al-Marhum Haj Ali, he passed away unexpectedly. He was 27. And after he passed, I'll never forget, I was working on putting a table together at my house. And I received a packet in the mail. And it was about 40 to 50 pages filled with the stories of how he impacted all the people that he had worked with. And so when I got that packet, the sequence of events that kind of unfolded afterwards just kind of naturally fell in place where I received this packet. I was challenging everything that I was doing in life. I no longer felt any purpose pursuing the climbing of the corporate ladder. I wanted to give back. I wanted to pay tribute to my brother Ali Marhum. Part of me wanted to leave altogether, just, flee the whole city. Just pack my things, leave, as my best friend, understand what life is now, and then come back to at a different time in life.
You were that close to him?
Yeah. I mean, he was number one, I'm number two, 2 years apart, roughly. We lived about a quarter mile away from one another. Lived together for, largely growing up, but also when we both moved out, we lived together. And, when you lose somebody that close, you begin to ask the question, what's the purpose? How can such a thing happen? You take a whole spiral of events that occurs.
You were 25 at that time?
I was 25. Yeah.
And
he passed October 15th, 2015. The following week, one of my mentors said, hey, do you mind sharing a resume with me? Your resume. I said, sure, no problem. I shared that resume. That packet in the mail came in. 2 weeks after that, I got a call from people who know David Knizik. I never knew him. He said, hey, can we sit down for a conversation? And I said, I have to get through the Autobahn and such, and then we'll sit down. I sat down with him. I was like, what's going on? He's like, your name comes up. People are wondering if you'd be willing to run for office. And I said, you guys are coming to me at just been 40 days. My brother just passed away. Why at this time? I said, listen, go back, go find somebody else who you think is much better for the opportunity. Let me know who you find. I kind of don't want to think about this right now. I'm focused on my family. And so just let me know what you find out. A few more weeks come by, he reaches back out and he says, no, we've been looking around and we think this is the direction that a lot of folk would like to go into. My mentors were reaching out at that point. And I said, well, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I've just kind of learned about this whole state legislature just after the initial conversations. I really think you can find somebody who's far more qualified to run for this role. But you know what? In the back of my mind, I'm saying, let me do this. And if I'm not successful, pack my bags. I'll go on a long-term trip just to try to find myself and then return. And if it is successful, Allahu Alam, we'll see what's going to happen moving forward. But I really want to put all my effort into it and see if I can give back to the degree that my brother Ali was doing in his life.
What did Ali do? What was Ali doing in his life?
Ali was a director at Quicken Loans.
Okay.
So it sounds like minuscule. How does such a person have such a strong impact? But what you found in the stories that people shared was he was very intuitive. He cared for people innately. He was a very vulnerable person. And so he would sit down and have meaningful conversations with you. If he thought you were having a bad day, he's the type that would go buy a full meal, a coffee, a tea, sit down with you. What's going on? Open up to me. If he knew you were in financial distress, he would offer all the financial support in the world to you with no expectation of ever being paid back. That was just the natural person that he was. I think largely to the degree of growing up as the oldest son in an immigrant family, knowing you have that role and that role and responsibility that you have to assume that many of us carried growing up. So that's, just those lessons were just piercing, throughout your whole life. And when it manifests into running for office and you finally get the position, it almost feels as if you've been groomed to run for office to give back your whole life because of the life and the struggles that we've all had.
So when all that happens, Allah Allah yarhamu passes, I feel like it's very hard, the hardest on the parents, because parents don't really expect they're going to lose a kid. Usually parents think like, God will take me first, then my kids will follow. So what are your mom and dad going through? And how are you, with all that hurt inside of you, able to stand next to them? Like, what do you tell your mom? What do you tell your dad?
There are no words.
Okay.
So I think that's like the immediate. You can't, I think that's like a fallacy that people believe there are comforting words that you can offer to somebody who just lost a parent or a child. Nonetheless, to your point, I think all parents expect to be buried by their children. No parent expects to bury a child, which I think might be the most difficult thing to do in this world. And in my mind, the only thing that was happening there was, great, I'm now the oldest. So I assume the responsibilities that my brother once had. And so everything that had to do with just running the family on a day-to-day basis, because your mother and your father are grieving, and they're grieving to a different degree. I don't want to say greater or less. It is greater to a very extent, but it's also just different than a sibling grieves. And so you have to allow them the time and the ability to mourn as they mourn, and you have to assume the hem and the responsibility.
It takes a lot of strength to do that, especially because you're grieving too.
Yeah.
Oof.
I'm a sheikh. I was just at a funeral, and Sheikh Ahmed said it best. He said, we all have this belief that this world, this life is supposed to be easy. He said, where is that written? They're not written anywhere that this life is supposed to be very smooth, easygoing. It's the complete opposite. This life is meant to be riddled with trials and tribulations. And what's supposed to come out of that is how you respond to all these difficult moments. That's what this life was literally created for, and what determines what happens in the afterlife. Yeah. And so, it was meaningful to hear it again just a few days ago.
It's a good reminder, always.
It's always a good reminder.
So you turned to politics that way, and you ended up being mayor from Syracuse.
Yeah, something like that.
While you were coming up for mayor, it was, all the videos we saw of you was Abdullah reciting dua, Abdullah speaking Islam first, staying true to your identity. First, before we get into that, how do you define your identity? What do you identify as?
This question is very strange. I think whenever I introduce myself as a Muslim Arab American. My faith is my strongest identity, more so than being Lebanese or being Arab. It's absolutely 100% being Muslim. That's just the household that I grew up in. That's what I identify most.
So identifying as a Muslim, but you live in a non-Muslim country. How do you navigate making decisions and just going about what you have to do for the city from that perspective?
I wish I could say that there was a playbook. It's not like, and I don't want this to sound pretentious in any way, it's not like I can refer to the person who did it before me and say, oh, look, this is how you navigate such and such.
You are the first.
And at least in this city, there are some across the country that you're beginning to learn of, or might have did it in a different country, that you try to, build those relationships to ask questions in those difficult moments. Because really, leaning on a network that you have is one of the most important things you can do in any position that you have, regardless of the type of role that you play. And so for me, I can't tell you that I'm always spot on in the decision making. I think, I understand it's a secular society. I understand that I have to navigate, I'm sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Michigan, and the ordinances and the codes for the city of Dearborn. And to the best of my ability, that's what I try to do. There are things that you have to regulate that you might not touch as a Muslim. For example, when I was in the state house, there are many a time when legislation comes up where you have to regulate alcohol and drinking, you have to regulate smoking, you have to regulate the casino and the gambling industry, you have to regulate things that have to deal with interest. All these things which are haram, you still have to regulate them. That's the job that you were sworn to uphold. And so you navigate it to the best of your ability. Always trying to put in the back of your mind, great, I'm trying to advance the quality of life for the people that I represent. And that's like the North Star.
So that is always like a focal point in your thinking. There's these people that look like me, like that's the bigger interest for you.
Well, it's both, right? The interesting thing is, when you're in Lansing, there's 148 legislators, 110 representatives, 38 state senators. I was the only Muslim. Now, the unique thing is I was only elected to represent the city of Dearborn, but oftentimes when you default to being the only, you no longer just represent your district, you also represent all of who you are across the whole state. And it's a heavy burden. It's not one, you never think about it when you're actually running. When you assume the office, then you realize how true it is. I think it's a bit different as mayor, where I'm sworn to this city, I'm not in the state, and so you are sworn to uphold what's in the best account for all of Dearborn's residents. Those who look and sound like me, but also those who don't look and sound like me. That's what you're sworn to uphold, and that's what you have to do. And from those who are minority to those who are the majority.
Is it hard to keep everyone happy?
It's you have to accept, I won with 55% of the vote.
Yeah.
So I came in, 45% did not want me.
Yeah.
And so you're never going to get 100%. You cannot aim or try to achieve 100%. If that's the goal that you set for yourself, you've automatically failed. It's just it's impossible. There are people, even if I were to achieve all the metrics that they set out, for some, just innately because of who I am, they will never support or be happy. And there are others. I mean, there's so many mixed opinions on myself in office. Should a Muslim be in office? Should a Muslim not be in office? And so you have to understand, you can't try to please everybody. That's not the goal of being in office. The goal, if you're really in it for public service, is to try to advance the quality of life on a set of metrics that you think are achievable. And that's what you have to go out and try to accomplish to the best of your ability. Abraham Lincoln has a quote, and forgive me, I'm going to get this wrong to a great degree. He said, he kind of often gets asked if he thinks he's the best person for the position. And his response was, I can't tell you if I'm the best person for the position. All I can tell you is I'm here and I have the position. And it's my duty to do the best that I can with the time that I have and this power that's been given to me by the people who elected me. And that's what I would tell you now. I can't tell you the most difficult question I got was probably at like a Salina auditorium, and a third grader said, do you think you deserve the position? And I just paused. I can't tell you if I deserve it. All I can tell you is that I'm here right now. I have 4 years, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And Allahu Alam, what's to happen in the future.
Is that what you told the third grader?
That's what I told the third grader. I said, I don't know if I deserve it, but
that's a good question.
Ask me again in 2025 when the election comes up.
What's one rule that you have for yourself that you would never break?
Family comes first. Protect. If I cannot protect or be there for my own, immediate family, my wife, my daughter, my siblings, my parents, then I can't be there for the community. And so that's like the one unbreakable rule. There are things that I cannot sacrifice for the sake of, this career or this life that I'm, also trying to give back to for the rest of the city of Dearborn. Because if you fail to be there for your own family, you can't be there for your broader family.
It's a very busy schedule, though.
Very busy schedule.
How do you manage being like number one priority family and then still do the city work?
Alhamdulillah for my wife who's a godsend, who's understanding. And I do my best. There are times that I work. I have a great team at the office, and obviously the first year and a half, first 2 years, you do anything, it's a grind, especially in mayorship with all the issues that we have brewing in the city of Dearborn. And so, but I do my best that you have to block times off on your calendar. that are strictly for family time. That there are those major milestone moments and activities and events and holidays and gatherings and celebrations that you cannot miss. You still have your wish bit.
Yeah.
You know, making sure I visit my in-laws or visit my aunts and uncles. I go to the funerals, the weddings, whatever it might be. You can't usher in any way. And so, you know, through a phenomenal team, through a phenomenal partner with my wife, that's really, I can't tell you I'm perfect at it. I fault many a times on a daily basis. But I do my best, and I'm conscious of where my faults are.
You mentioned a lot of problems going around in the city. What are the biggest problems we're facing in the city that most people don't know of?
I think one of the biggest is, I think people underestimate the severity of the mental health crisis, especially again within the Muslim Arab community, Muslim men in their early 20s, late teens.
How much do you know of that?
Every day when I come into office, I receive a police report. The police report breaks up into 8 precincts, kind of 8 beats across the city. And within each of those beats, it talks about the major incident or incidents that might have happened the night before in these beats across the city. Almost on a daily basis, there's a mental health related incident, especially amongst young people, in particular from the Muslim Arab community, man in his early 20s or late teens. You know, whether it's overdose, suicide, a mental health crisis or episode or a flare or a situation that occurred. I don't think people understand the severity and the degree that it's present within the city of Dearborn, and it's not really talked about. We might talk about it whenever somebody passes away unexpectedly. We say, Allah Hammoud, we see the TCD post, we comment on it, more needs to be done. And that's pretty much the extent of our activism around this issue. But there's a great need for us to actually have a community-wide conversation on this topic, talk about what resources are actually needed. And there's a lot of organizations doing phenomenal work in this space, but it's
on a daily basis?
On a near daily basis. Almost every major incident within my first year that unfolded was related to mental health.
Did you expect that?
No. When you talk about the arson that occurred at Masjid al-Huda,
Yeah.
when you talk about the incident where the individual walked into the police station at Dearborn Police, when you talk about the hotel shooting, when you talk about there was a mother that jumped off the bridge on Greenfield over Michigan Avenue, postpartum depression. Almost every single incident. We had an incident where you had an infant who came across a heroin needle on the floor from a parent that was using, that overdosed. And the cop was smart enough to quickly issue Narcan as a life-saving measure, identifying the drugs on the floor. And so there's a number of incidents that come running through my mind, all related to this topic. Not what you expected, but just the reality now that you enter the office and now you try to ask yourself, what can you do about it?
It's impossible for you to do by yourself, to do all that change. What do you think we can do to start?
I think communicating about it. I think having an open conversation. I think not shying away from the topic. I think pushing the interfaith community, whether it's at the masajid, at the churches, wherever it might be, so all start talking about this topic. I think having groups of sorts that are there to uplift and support. I remember when I was working with the Safe Substance Abuse Coalition with HYPE, we used to march with those that were in recovery at the Memorial Day Parade. We weren't ashamed to march alongside them. We have to take away the shame that's usually stigmatized with those that are fighting or are in recovery. Alhamdulillah, they're in recovery. You wouldn't shame anybody that's suffering from any other condition. You don't look at somebody with cancer and say, shame on you for having cancer. If somebody's suffering from addiction or suffering from a mental health issue, we should look at it similarly. We should not shame them. We should be there to uplift, to support, to see what resources they need to try to get them in a pathway in recovery. And recovery is a lifelong process. It's not that you recover and 3 months later, that's it, khalas, alhamdulillah, he recovered. No, it's a lifelong battle that this individual will face. And we have to be there for a lifelong situation. And there are phenomenal people in this space. Rabbi Darwish is somebody who's phenomenal in this space. Access is doing great work in this space. LAHC is in this space. There's a lot of folks in this space.
Wow. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And you think talking about it would do the job? Like if I know someone that I know is using, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to tell them?
I think the philosophy of our parents would be distance yourself away from this individual, stop talking to him, don't hang out with him, he'll corrupt you.
Right.
I think my philosophy is have a tough conversation with them, see if they're ready to try to seek help and assistance. If so, go with them to one of these facilities that might assist them in putting them on a pathway to recovery. Do following up, just checking in, see how they're doing. I think that's the appropriate pathway,
If
especially
not,
for somebody who is there who thinks that they might be ready to take that step forward.
what if they don't want, like they're scared, they don't want to go seek guidance, they don't want to tell anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's still being that good friend and little by little continually being supportive, offering supportive comments, supportive statements, pathways to a solution, pathway to resources. And honestly, the best advice I can give is to not even listen to me, but to seek the guidance of a mental health professional who's an expert in this space and what the appropriate steps might be.
So you mentioned that family comes first. And while you were running for mayor, when you went up to give that speech after you got elected, your wife was pregnant and you said you were expecting your daughter to come very soon. How does life change? First you were newly stated as mayor, and now you have a daughter, first daughter.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had election the first week of November. Daughter came first week December. I assumed office first week January. And for anyone who is a father, especially the father to a girl who is the greatest blessing, it's the greatest rahmah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. It's the most meaningful thing you can possibly have in this world. There's no greater role in this life that I love more than being a father. That's just hands down. But it takes growth. It's not easy. If you want to be an active father, a disciplined father, a supportive father, a present father, especially in a fast-paced world with a very intense job, you have to put effort. It's not, you can't just sit idly by and say, I'll be there tomorrow, I'll skip this, all that. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And alhamdulillah, I have my wife Fatima is the most amazing support system, and also helps me be a better father in so many different ways. She catches things where, I might let slip through the cracks. But it's been a learning lesson. And I think the lens of being a father at the same time of assuming mayorship has also helped guide a lot of the decisions that I'm trying to make. I'm realizing now that we don't really have much going on in the city for young kids. Aside from taking them to the park and maybe to the library, where else are you going? You're typically leaving the city to try to engage in these activities, whatever it might be. And so that's why a lot of the investments that we've been trying to make are targeted towards families, because I'm going through this right now, and I'm seeing and I'm learning and I'm understanding. And so it's been the greatest teacher.
I was thinking about it. You look at your daughter, thinking about long term. She's about to grow up in this city, and you're responsible for everything that's going on in the city. There has to be pressure in that.
It's pressure. I always tell everyone, I'm trying to move the city forward to the greatest degree possible, so that when my daughter comes of age and maybe she's applying for college or trying to determine what city she wants to live in, that she says, Dearborn is such a great city, I want to live in Dearborn. That's like, the pie in the sky aspiration. Is that going to happen? I have no idea. But one can dream, I think, just like our parents want us to be nearby, you also want your children to grow up nearby. But it's an immense pressure. It really is.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what's going to happen to her when she goes to school and people start approaching her with the issues that their parents have to say, hey, listen, take your property tax bill to the mayor's daughter.
And then she comes home with all these solutions for you.
Our community, 110,000 people. But alhamdulillah, it feels like a small town. And it's also being in public office is also a weight that your family carries, because whether they want to or not, our community, manna sahle.
That's one of
They're very, somebody has a problem with me, they're reaching out to my father, they're reaching out to my uncle, they're reaching out to my mother.
You've had people reach out to your parents.
They've messaged they're messaging my wife, foul things. I mean, you name it, it's just pretty much been done. It's one of the worst parts of the job is, as much as I do a good job in separating my private life from my public life, there are some people in the public who will drag, they might disagree with me on an issue. Great, disagree with me. No, they will drag your whole family and everything.
It's one of the cons to being in such a small knit community.
It is.
But how do your parents navigate that? Like, what does your mom approach you? Tell you, hey, this person talked to me. They don't like what you did here.
It's You have to understand, if somebody approached your mother and said, hey, Jafar is doing 1, 2, and 3, what's your mother's immediate response? It's probably going to be defensive. And
Yeah, right.
kind of thing. And so I think there's one element of they try to be this shield, but I think a second of it is it's hurtful. You know, I'm the person who ran for office, not my wife, not my daughter, who wasn't who's a little over a year, not my parents, not my siblings, not my uncle. And so approach me with the disagreements that you might have. Don't bring me or bring my family into this. But some people don't have those boundaries. They don't draw that line in the sand. I draw that line distinctly, and saying that you're disagreeing with me, come to me and talk to me about it. I'll have a conversation on any issue you want, but don't drag the family through the mud.
It kind of comes from a place where you were so involved when you were a young kid growing up here. Like a kid that might have played football with you be like, oh, I know Abdullah well enough to go talk to his brother. I know his brother. I can tell his brother this and that.
But it's not even about talking. I have no problem with people who want to have civilized conversation. They're not reaching out to talk.
Oh, it's a text.
Yeah, they're sending messages of just degrading messages, disgusting messages, or, using language that you would never be accepting of. Unfortunately, that's the default. I don't know if they bring us over from the old country, because how many of our family relatives talk over there about our politicians and so on and so forth, and it carries over. But for me, it's I try to make that distinction of personal separate from public, but doesn't carry with everyone.
Do your family in Lebanon get like Abdullah's, how do you call them? Yeah, I'm the mayor.
I am of the type where I hate that.
Yeah.
I love my name. Jidd al-Marhum Haj Muhammad gave me my name. And so I always tell everybody, like, call me by my name. Don't call me by my title. The title doesn't bring respect to the individual. It's the opposite. The individual brings respect to the title if you're doing a worthy job. And so, yeah, they celebrate the accomplishments and the elections.
Do they get the magnitude?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Because politics in Lebanon are very different.
Very different.
The mayors in our villages are very different than the mayors of modern cities. And so I'm not sure if they do get the magnitude or not. But for me, it doesn't matter, because when I go visit, I don't want them to welcome me as the mayor of Dearborn. I want them to welcome me as Abdullah ibn Lebanon.
And you mentioned your name, and a lot of people not even get into politics, get into any job. Yeah. And the first thing they do is Ali is now Al. Yeah. Abdullah is now Abe, and Muhammad is now Mo, but you kept Abdullah.
When I first was pursuing the run for state representative, a lot of people from our community advised me to change my name. If you look at a lot of folks who were successful in the run for office, almost unanimously across the board, they all had, quote unquote, what I would say white passing names. Yeah. Ism Abdullah is very hard to, there's no real nickname. You could be, people push me to change my name to Abe. Yeah. Abe Hammoud, trim down that beard some, we're slightly white passing, no one's going to know. And I said, I love my name. I would never do that. 1. 2, I'm in Dearborn. If you can't run with a name like Abdullah in Dearborn, where is it permissible to run with a name of Abdullah? And 3, you also want to set the standard for the next generation. Winning the election isn't the sole determinant of if the election was successful or not. Easing the pathway for somebody is also considered a success in my eyes. Somebody who was unsuccessful in the election results, but successful in that you won many hearts over, you demonstrated you can stay true to yourself and still run for office and maybe encourage the next generation to pick up the mantle and carry it forward. I think that's a success as well. And so there's many ways to define a success, but staying true to who you are, I think, is of the most importance.
A lot of people that want to run for politics, they might say that because they're a minority and maybe they have like a minority decision or a minority, you could call it a minority decision. They're like, I don't want to run because my voice wouldn't be heard. I can't do change. We're in America. It's already written. They're going to do whatever the hell they want to do, and we don't get a say. Yeah. How hard really is it to make a change?
At the local level, like your local city council, local mayor, clerk, school board, that's the closest way to make change. They're making decisions that impact you each and every single day. It's within reach. You just have to be willing to go out there and get it. And you don't even have to run for office to make the change. You just have to show up. You have to be present. You have to be persistent. You have to communicate. You have to be involved. Get out there and vote to a great degree. When you go to when you start going further away from your local, you go to county politics or state politics or federal politics, can one person make a change? I would argue that one person can be a catalyst for change. It takes a little bit more time with those larger bodies of government, but it's still very much possible. Do I look back at my time in the state house and think that I made change? Was able to bring a lot of dollars down to the city of Dearborn directly to help make large investments, whether people know it or not. It's not about being recognized for it, but you can make change if your heart is in the right place and you advocate for it in a good way. I would never tell anybody to not be involved. Is running for office for everyone? It's a different conversation. It's like not just like being a doctor is not for everybody. Being a lawyer, being a host of a podcast, it's not for everyone. Running for office is very similar. It's not for everyone.
How do you know if you're?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I didn't know until until I won. It's like whether you're ready for it or not. Here you are. And even what I would tell you is I've come across a lot of elected officials. Just because they have the position doesn't mean they're cut out for it.
Yeah.
It's just like any other profession that you have in any industry. Just because somebody's also in that role doesn't mean they're cut out for it or they're good at it. You have good and bad in every single profession. Mm-hmm. Same exact thing. Probably more bad in the profession of public office than good. But you don't know until you sit down and you give it the adequate amount of time to think about it thoughtfully and to understand, is this something I want to pursue or not? What are the pros? What are the cons? Can I do this? Can I not do this? Why do I want to do this? Probably the most important question to ask is why. Hopefully it's not for notoriety or for name recognition or whatever it might be, because I promise you it comes with a lot more pain than not.
You know that firsthand.
I mean, you tell me of a job where on a daily basis you're being called out more on social media than you are being praised. The reality of government's a unique thing. You turn your attention towards government when government fails you. Nobody calls me when their garbage gets picked up and says, Alhamdulillah, my garbage got picked up today. Thank you so much.
That's expected.
That's expected. But you're going to call me when it doesn't get picked up. You don't call me and tell me, hey, my road is perfectly paved. Thank you so much. No, you're going to call me when you got a pothole in it. And so this is a unique profession where you only reach out when government has failed at some point in time. And so most of the time, the calls that we're fielding are not the positive calls, the thank yous. It's all the issues that you have to address. So people have pent up frustration over things that have not been met, demands that have been made that have faltered, services that have been promised that have not been kept up.
Yeah.
And so it's a very unique position. It's not one filled with praise. And so if you're somebody who really likes to give back, who loves to work through difficult situations, try to tackle difficult issues with innovative solutions, it can be a space that you can flourish in, but you have to have like the heart and the mental toughness, because you have to almost on an hourly basis as things unfold, and you say, listen, I understand their frustration. Keep moving forward to try to address the solution.
A little kid comes up to you and he's like, I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah.
What's one trait that you have that you would tell the little kid to work on? And what's one trait that you have that you would tell the kid to not work on, to ditch, to avoid?
I think one of the traits that I like to think I'm decent at is I'm a team player. I strongly believe any success I have is because of the success of a team that I've built, or that a team that has come together. And so what I would tell that kid is to know how to identify strong talent, to build strong relationships, and to rely on those who are smarter than you for the solutions in the space that you don't have much knowledge in. That's, one of the best pieces of advice I can offer. I'm not successful because I know everything about everything. I'm successful because those around the table are far smarter than me. And I just have that privilege. On a trait where they can be better, whenever I run for office, whenever you're at home, I'm just thinking about my wife right now. I read every comment.
Okay.
I read every comment.
That's a bad thing to say.
It's bad. It's bad. And, to myself, I call it strategic intelligence. The reality is I read every single comment and I work nonstop in my mind. I'm a workaholic, as people would say. I love what I do. It takes its toll in all ways. But the advice I would offer that child is develop ways to, kind of break away from everything. It's not easy. I haven't been able to do it 100%. I try to do it when I'm hanging out with family, so on and so forth. But if I'm laying on a couch late night trying to watch a movie, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking solutions, problems, these comments that were made. How do I tackle these issues? What more can I be doing? What about the team? What about this? And so but carrying all of that on your shoulders at all times is very burdensome. And so I'm doing my best in trying to manage it, and I'm getting better with time. Because again, I'm only 6-7 years into public service as a whole, second year as mayor, so still fairly new, relatively new.
Yeah.
But that's the advice I'd offer that child is find ways to just have that mental toughness, and to also be able to separate from what's happening before you in any profession that you pursue, so that you have me time to a great degree.
What's one comment that you read that stuck you in the heart?
Ooh, man. So there was a time a few years ago where somebody messaged, and I forgot what it was, but they told me, you stabbed the whole Muslim ummah in the back, and your uncle the sheikh would be so disappointed in you. There's certain comments like that just take a great degree of shittiness for you to write.
Yeah.
And some people know how to write it. I think that's one of the top comments. I think some of the other comments that are just really up there and bad, if some people who brought up my brother in Marhum who passed away, or who bring up my daughter, and that's just like it's a red line.
You don't mess with death, and you don't mess with kids.
I'm a very forgiving person, and people have said a whole lot of things to me. Some have approached me afterwards and apologized for things they said in the past, and who am I? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. Who am I to not forgive? But you don't forget those things. Forgiveness is one element. Forgetting is a whole different element.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that I forget those things. There are certain things and I wish, that's another piece of advice I'd offer the child, is find ways to forgive and forget. Because carrying it in the back of your mind takes its toll.
It's burdensome.
It's very burdensome.
On those bad days where you wake up and it's not going well for you, but you wake up and you know that you have the responsibility of a city on your back. How do you navigate that? What do you do? What's your process of let me relax and just take time for myself? And then, because everyone needs it.
Yeah.
If we're just taking it as any job, in any job, you get burnout. You're like, I'm tired today. I can't do this today. But it kind of come with a different degree of responsibility from job to job. And your job is one that weighs a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Mentally what I tell myself is like, ha'ayan Rabbi. It's not for me to try to get it in this world. Sometimes you have to accept that. People might not know. The reality is people don't have all the information that I have at every single time where I'm making decisions. And so sometimes you're going to get a lot of criticism for the things that you do, but you have information that you have, and here's the rationale, or you have your perspective and your thought process and your ideas. So you have to accept that one, that you can't justify everything you do all the time. As it pertains to like what I do, I'm a big believer in physical fitness. And so I'm at the gym just about every single day at 6 o'clock in the morning, as much as I can. I'm a big believer in dua and in prayer. That to me is a great escape. Going to the masjid, I think, is the one place, one of the, of many, where titles should mean nothing. And when I walk in there, I walk in simply as my name, Abdullah. And I just try to get away and seclude and listen. So when you show up to your wajbat, when I go to as many of the funerals as I can in Asbuat, it sounds, like, why do you do that? But it also grounds you of like, this is what you're working towards. And I never forget that. Then obviously, the most important thing for me right now is, hanging out with my daughter and my wife. Yeah. There's nothing like there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in the world.
When you go into the gym, just trying to relax, you get people bombarding you with questions and wanting to.
I've been speaking about this more frequently and saying that I think it's aib to call me by my title at the masjid. There's no need for it. I think, sometimes the people will say, this person is the uncle of the mayor. Yeah, I think that's very aib. I don't think anybody should say I'm the uncle, they're the uncle of the mayor, they're the parents of the mayor. No, but actually in the reverse, I am their nephew, I am their son. That's how the respect is always given. It shouldn't be flipped. When I go to a commemoration of some sorts, I don't sit on the front because I know You know, people are always looking. They're going to want to, whatever it might be. Like anybody else, I اخذ بالخاطر, and I sit in the middle, I sit in the back, whatever it might be. Because I don't want to be a distraction of any sorts.
Yeah.
But our community sometimes like, no, لازم تقعد احترام, 1, 2, and 3. I just disagree with
You
that.
don't see it like that?
I disagree with that. I think I'm just like anybody else that walked in. Treat me like anybody else when I walk in. That's why sometimes I'm just like this. I don't, I'm just Abdullah bil-akhir.
Yeah.
But I think our community, unfortunately, there's many of us that have this attachment to titles and that it provides significance. I get those who think it comes with respect, and I'll say thank you so much. And especially in that place, there should be no attention or significance given to an elected title of any sort.
Do they come with problems though? Tell you problems, tell you this happened, that happened?
I can't tell. I wish I can tell you that, I've been to funerals and been pulled out of a funeral to talk about a situation that's unfolding, or somebody has a permit issue at the building department. That happens. There sometimes are not boundaries.
Yeah.
But who am I to say? I mean, I signed up for this.
Yeah, that's true.
I ran for this position. It's not like I applied for it.
Right.
And so I don't have the right to complain about that. I'm here to help in any way I can. Sometimes people only, when they come across me, the problem comes top of mind and they approach me with it right then and there.
Right.
Can't do anything about that.
What's the end goal for you?
The end goal is to...
Like when it's all said and done, right?
Yeah.
30, 40 years pass by.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be? Take me through, let's say you had a goals list and you were writing down the goals for the next 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
What do you want accomplished and how do you want to be remembered when it's all done? But let's start with the first part, the list. Like what do you want to do?
Yeah. I don't have a 10, 20, 30-year plan. I think one of the things I learned after my brother passed away fairly young is you can't have a 30, 40-year plan. He didn't have 30. He had 27 years and 9 months. And so who am I to try to plan out 5, 10 years from down the road? And so the best thing I can do right now, like my long-term goal is 1 year from now is, can I build this park? Or can I fix this small issue? That to me is what's meaningful. When I look back on my service in elected office, I hope that I just help people. That's like the takeaway message. Can I quantifiably look back and say I made people's quality of life better? Distinctly. Can I say that? Can I feel good about it? And can I put my head on the pillow at the end of the night and go to sleep comfortably with all the decisions that I had to make? It's not easy. That's kind of on the professional side. On the personal side is I want a big, beautiful family. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends as many healthy children to all who would love, and I would love nothing more than a big family, and to raise children with my wife who just love being around their parents. I think that to me is a greater success than anything I can accomplish in the professional world.
Definitely.
And when I ask people to your last point of what do you want people to remember about me, this might sound mortifying for most, but I think about my tombstone and what I wanted to say. And I'm at the point now where I think, I want the small plaque that just says Abdullah Hammoud lived, died, and his name was his title.
Would you want a packet like the one you received when Ali passed away, for your family to receive, your children to receive?
I don't want them to receive it. I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to receive it.
He's got it.
That's and honestly, I'm a firm believer in that حق بالآخر عن ربي, and there are things that you do that people are just not supposed to know about. I firmly believe in that. We were blessed to know of those 40 pages that people sent on behalf of Khayali. But even if it wasn't sent, you think I didn't know that about my brother? I knew it without it being sent. And I know what was sent was only a fraction of the good that he did. So for me, I don't need it documented. I don't need it written. I think, alhamdulillah, I have that comfort level with myself that as long as I know I'm being good with my family and I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm not going to bat 100. Let's just be real. There are several times people are going to approach me with issues, and the answer they're not going to like that they're going to hear is no. But at least I'm being honest and thoughtful and forward in that conversation. But that's all I need, just to know that I did what I could.
And you mentioned earlier that you're not going to get it right every single time. It's just part of any job, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. There are many learning lessons in this job. You have to take it straight on the chin.
Especially when when you said 110,000, we're
Nah.
So there's 110,000 people looking at exactly what you're doing, you know?
Scrutinize everything.
So your mistake is
Yeah.
multiply that by 110,000 eyes on it.
Correct.
You know?
And everybody has a different belief of what is right.
Right.
And so, to your earlier question of like, are you trying to make everybody proud? You can't. If I asked you to define success and you asked 100 people to define success, 100 of you would define it differently. And so if I asked you, how do you define success for a mayor, and asked 100 people, how do they define success for a mayor? They're all going to answer it differently. That's just the reality of it. I think that's different than from like a cardiac surgeon. Success is making sure that this person
Stays alive.
Exactly. So success comes in many forms for the job and role that I have. But again, one that I asked for, one that I assumed, one that I have at this point in time. And time will only tell if it was a decent job or not.
What scares you?
Not knowing. As strange as that sounds. The ambiguity in this role is difficult. You often have to make decisions without knowing 100% of the information. That's just the reality of the job. Things are unfolding. You want to make sure all your police officers come home every single night. It scares you if something unfolds at night. Your firefighters, making sure they all come home at night. If water main breaks happen, if a flooding erupts, all that scares you of like just not knowing of what's to come. But you have to be prepared to face it once it does arrive. So I think that's one of the things that scares me most about the job is you never know what to expect when you wake up or even while you're sleeping and the call that you get.
Okay. I'm going to end with this question. Let's say you brought up your brother a lot, and it's clear how big of a role he's had for you to get to where you are today. Let's say you could write Ali one last message, and he can get it. He'll read it right now. What would you tell Ali?
I'll see you soon.
Damn. I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. إن السابقون ونحن اللاحقون.
I love that.
Yeah. الحياة.
Yeah. I appreciate your time, Abdullah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.